Well, Iran and the United States have ended the second round of nuclear talks in Rome this Saturday after an initial round in Oman last week. It also said the third round of nuclear talks are set to begin in a few days. The stakes are high as President Donald Trump has previously told Tehran that the only two options on the table are a deal or war. Well, for more on those talks, I'm joined by Doug Herbert, our international affairs commentator. So, Doug, there was no immediate readout on how the talks went, but the Iranian state television is reporting that they were constructive. Are we to take this as a sign that things are indeed moving forward?
Well, look, constructive is obviously diplomatic jargon of the highest order, Jenny, right? When you basically want to say that, they avoided the worst, meaning the talks didn't break down. No one apparently stormed out of the meeting. There was no issue, no stumbling block that is going to prevent them from going forward. So they're basically in sort of a stasis. That is, you could say 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But the fact that they're going forward, at least they will be ongoing. The words you were going to hear with these talks, right? We heard them with Oman when they met in Oman last week, Rome this week in the second round of talks. That use of constructive suggests that at least they are continuing to talk. And in diplomacy, obviously, the idea of talking is better than not talking at all. There are a lot of people who believe that these talks shouldn't even have to happen at all. These talks are only happening because, in the view of those who take a very dim view of these talks, Donald Trump basically tore up an agreement back in 2000 that negotiated and agreed in 2015, tore it up early in his first term in office. An agreement that, by the judgment of most of the international community, a U.S.-Iran agreement negotiated with European partners as well and the UN, was working relatively well. Yes, a flawed, imperfect agreement, but one that seemed to be working also in the judgment of nuclear negotiators. And since then, you have had, yes, the fact that Donald Trump tore it up and that there were consequences after that, and things geopolitically evolved, to put it mildly. We've led to a point that he's basically trying to reinstate a deal, but what he would say is a better deal, for a deal that he basically ripped up. He's trying to resolve a problem that he created and resolve it in a way that he says will ultimately be better. So yeah, they're constructive, they're going forward, they haven't broken down. But that said, it's a very low bar because a lot of people say these talks should never have had to have happened in the first place.
So the talks are moving forward, and you said talks are better than no talks, obviously, but it's hard to overstate the deep distrust that remains between the two sides, isn't it? I mean, given this, what's brought Iran back to the negotiating table?
Yeah, well, first I will underline the deep distrust, absolutely. From Iran's perspective, they're negotiating with a Donald Trump administration under the president who, like I said, tore up the original reasonably well-working deal, tore it up, applied, then reverted to what he called a maximum pressure campaign of very harsh sanctions, which have brought most of Iran's economy to its knees and has really made the lives of ordinary Iranians, to say the least, extremely difficult. And also, along the way, back in a strike, a U.S. strike back on Iran in 2020, killed one of the top generals, an Iranian general. So there are reasons that Iran comes to these talks with a lot of distrust of Donald Trump, a man whom they don't quite know if he knows what he thinks about this. From the U.S. perspective, Iran is habitually demonized and vilified, and Donald Trump and his administration have seemed to have given mixed messages, one day talking about the prospect of imminent military action and unless Iran genuflects and bends to the will of the Western negotiators, of the U.S. The next day, they're basically talking about, but we need a diplomatic solution. There was talk this week about how Donald Trump had, quote, waved off an Israeli strike plan and an Israeli attack plan. It's well known Israel's watching these negotiations very closely. A lot of Israel observers say the last thing that Israel really wants, even if they don't explicitly say it, is any sort of deal. They would like the end game of this to be a dead end, which would give Israel the pretext for a war, but a war which would necessarily, that is strikes against Iran, but that would necessarily need the involvement of the U.S. to support Israel. So Donald Trump's mixed messaging is really based on the fact that Donald Trump always reverts to he wants to be the winner. He wants a deal, and he knows that a war would not be equivalent to a deal. And on the other hand, he's also very much cognizant of the fact that Netanyahu, his staunch ally, tells him time and again, you can't trust Iran. We need to strike them. Sooner or later, they will let us down. And he also knows that there are a lot of his Republican allies in Congress who have, as they would see it, as the critics would see it, have drunk the same Kool-Aid as Benjamin Netanyahu and his allies, and that the allies in Congress also don't want to really see a deal. These mixed messages have led to sort of a perception of Iran where there's a lot of demonization of that country from the American perspective, the original source of all sin, and at the same time, this deep desire to want to try to pull a diplomatic rabbit out of the hat here and try to perhaps bring about some sort of peace, i.e. averting war in the region.
All right, Doug, thank you very much.